I never imagined that a single weekend trip could alter the way I saw myself, or the people I thought I knew best. My name is Ethan, and I've always been the quiet one in my family. My brother Ryan, on the other hand, is the opposite of me in every possible way, confident, charming, and effortlessly social. People gravitate toward him the way light pulls in moths. Growing up, I admired him, even envied him, but I also lived in his shadow. So when Ryan asked me to join him and his friends on a road trip to the mountains, I didn't hesitate. It felt like a rare invitation into his world, a chance to belong, to be seen. He said it would be fun, just a few days away from everything. You need to get out of your comfort zone, he joked, tossing me the car keys. I smiled, pretending not to be nervous. Deep down, I wondered if I'd fit in with his confident friends. The morning we left, the air smelled like rain and freedom. Ryan's old Jeep was packed with bags, snacks, and loud laughter. His friends, Liam and Noah, were already inside when I climbed in. Liam greeted me first, his voice calm and friendly. He had a quiet confidence that felt different from Ryan's energy. When our eyes met, he smiled, not a teasing one like Ryan's friends usually gave me, but something softer, warmer. The drive stretched for hours through winding roads and endless green. Music played low from Ryan's playlist, songs from their college days. Ryan and Noah argued about which trail to hike first, while I leaned my head against the window, letting the rhythm of the car drown my thoughts. Every now and then, Liam would ask me something, simple questions, like what I did for work or what kind of books I liked. But it was the way he listened that caught me off guard. When I spoke, he really heard me. By the time we reached the cabin nestled between the trees, the sun had dipped low behind the peaks. The air was cooler, and a faint mist clung to the pine branches. The cabin wasn't fancy, just wood, stone, and silence, but it felt alive in a way the city never did. Ryan took charge, handing out rooms, cracking jokes, and lighting a fire. Noah unpacked food while Liam helped me carry bags inside. You don't talk much, do you? Liam said, holding the door for me. I laughed lightly. Ryan does enough talking for both of us. He smiled, that quiet kind of smile again. Yeah, he does. Later that evening, we sat outside around a small fire pit. Ryan's girlfriend Emily arrived unexpectedly. He hadn't mentioned she was coming. Her presence changed the dynamic instantly. She was kind, but her arrival seemed to make Ryan show off more, louder laughter, bigger stories, constant glances in her direction. I sat across from them, watching as she leaned on his shoulder, laughing at every word. Liam sat beside me, silent but observant. The crackle of the fire filled the spaces between us. Every so often, our eyes met through the flickering light. There was no need for words, it was a moment of quiet understanding. I didn't know what it meant, and I didn't dare to assume. Still, I couldn't ignore how calm I felt near him, as if the noise around us faded whenever he looked my way. As the night deepened, Noah pulled out a guitar and began to play softly. Emily hummed along, Ryan sang off-key, and everyone laughed. I noticed Liam watching the flames instead, his thoughts seemingly far away. When I offered him a blanket, he hesitated before taking it, brushing my hand slightly. It was unintentional, or maybe it wasn't, but it sent a strange pulse through me. A cool wind swept through the clearing. Ryan and Emily went inside first, their laughter echoing faintly from the cabin. Noah followed soon after, muttering about getting more firewood for tomorrow. Then it was just me and Liam. He leaned back, staring at the stars. You ever feel like you're surrounded by people but still, invisible? His question startled me. It was too close to home. I nodded slowly. All the time. He looked at me, his eyes reflecting the glow of the fire. I thought I was the only one who felt that way. Neither of us said anything more. The silence wasn't awkward, it was heavy, alive with things neither of us could name. When I finally stood to leave, he whispered, almost to himself, "Good night, Ethan." That night, lying in the small cabin room, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that conversation, that look, that fleeting touch. Something had shifted, subtle, invisible, but powerful that I didn't know it then, but that moment by the fire was the beginning of everything that would follow. The night deepened, and the storm outside became a steady rhythm, each raindrop against the roof echoing my restless thoughts. I couldn't sleep, and the guest room felt stifling, the silence around me too heavy to bear. Eventually, I found myself wandering toward the living room, almost instinctively, drawn by a need I couldn't name. Mark was there, sitting in his usual chair, the soft hum of the rain outside blending with the faint warmth of the lamp. He looked up as I entered, and for a moment, we simply regarded each other in quiet recognition, neither of us speaking. I couldn't sleep, I admitted softly, aware of how childish it sounded that he nodded, offering a small, understanding smile. Neither could I, he replied. There was no judgment in his tone, only a calm acknowledgement that made the tension in my chest tighten. We sat together, side by side, not touching, yet feeling a closeness that seemed to bypass words. Our conversation began as it often did, about trivial things, about routines, but the words quickly gave way to something more intimate. Mark spoke about his fears, about the loneliness that sometimes seeped into his life despite appearances. His voice was quiet but steady, filled with a vulnerability I had rarely seen. That I listened, drawn to him in a way that startled me. Each pause, each slight shift of expression, seemed magnified in the dim light. I found myself sharing pieces of my own struggles, the confusion and uncertainty that had followed me since leaving college. There was a trust forming, fragile and unspoken, a sense that our isolation in the house had created a bubble where honesty felt possible. I knew, logically, that boundaries existed for a reason, yet in that moment, it seemed almost natural to lean closer, not physically, but emotionally, to the one person who seemed to understand me completely. A flash of lightning illuminated the room, and for an instant, I was acutely aware of the intensity between us. It wasn't desire in the conventional sense, nor was it malice or manipulation. It was curiosity, longing, and a need for connection that neither of us had anticipated. The conversation drifted, touching on dreams that had never been pursued, regrets that had been buried, and moments in life when choices were made out of obligation rather than desire. Mark's voice softened, and I realized that the man I had always seen as composed and distant had layers I had never imagined. Yet, amid the warmth of connection, a storm raged inside me that was far less tangible than the one outside. Every word exchanged, every subtle gesture, felt like a line being drawn, or crossed, between safety and risk. I questioned my own thoughts, the way my heart raced, the way my mind lingered on him long after a sentence had ended. I wanted to step back, to retreat to the safety of my room, yet some invisible force kept me there, listening, sharing, existing in that fragile space where emotional boundaries were tested. That we fell into a silence that was heavier than words. The hum of the storm, the flicker of the lamp, the quiet rhythm of our breathing, all of it seemed amplified. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped, and I could sense the subtle tension in the room, a pause pregnant with meaning. Neither of us dared to speak aloud. I wanted to move closer, yet I stayed rooted, acutely aware of what could happen if I gave in to impulse. I also understood, with a jolt of clarity, that the night was already changing me in ways I could not undo. Eventually, I returned to the guest room, my thoughts swirling like the storm outside. Sleep came fitfully, broken by the memory of his voice, his eyes, the weight of unsaid words. By morning, the house felt unchanged, but I knew that everything had shifted. Something had begun, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet permanent. I had crossed a threshold in emotion, in intimacy, in self-awareness, and I realized that the world I had taken for granted would never feel the same. The night had passed, but its echo would linger, guiding my thoughts, my actions, and my understanding of desire, trust, and the fragile boundaries we live by. Morning arrived with the slow gentleness of regret. The rain had stopped, leaving the forest damp and shimmering under thin strands of sunlight. The cabin was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of old wood. Ethan woke early, his mind still tangled in fragments of the night before, Noah's words, the silence that followed, and the undeniable truth he could no longer ignore. That he sat on the edge of the bed, listening to the faint sound of water dripping from the eaves outside. Everything felt heavier, as if the air itself had absorbed their unspoken confession. He wasn't sure what frightened him more, what had been revealed, or what it meant about himself. When Ethan stepped into the kitchen, Noah was already there, standing by the stove, making coffee. His back was turned, posture rigid, shoulders tight. He didn't look up when Ethan entered. "Morning," Ethan said, voice hesitant. "Morning," Noah replied softly, still facing the window. The usual warmth in his tone was gone, replaced by something cautious, fragile. Liam stumbled out of his room moments later, yawning loudly, breaking the tension without realizing it. "You two are up early," he said, rubbing his eyes. "Guess I slept through the storm." Ethan forced a smile. "Yeah, you did." Noah poured the coffee into 3 mismatched mugs and handed one to Liam, another to Ethan. Their fingers brushed briefly, and Ethan felt that same quiet electricity rush through him again, quick, uninvited, impossible to ignore. Breakfast passed in strained normalcy. Liam talked about plans for their drive back, the traffic, the weather, every topic safe and surface level. Ethan responded when necessary, but his mind drifted. Every glance toward Noah was a reminder of the space that had opened between them, and how easily it could break everything if either of them crossed it again. After clearing the dishes, Liam went outside to check the car. As soon as the door closed, Noah finally spoke. His voice was calm, but his hands trembled slightly. "About last night," he began. Ethan looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time that morning. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan said quickly, though he wanted him to. Noah shook his head. "No, I do. I shouldn't have said what I said. It wasn't fair to you." Ethan hesitated. "It wasn't wrong either." Noah's gaze softened. "Maybe not. But it complicates things." Ethan nodded slowly. "Things were already complicated. We just stopped pretending they weren't." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence carried an odd kind of understanding, one that didn't need words. Whatever had existed between them now lived in that space, quiet and unacknowledged but undeniably real. When Liam called from outside, they both startled slightly, breaking eye contact. "Car's ready." Liam shouted through the door, "Coming." Noah answered quickly. They packed their things in near silence. Every shared glance carried the weight of what couldn't be said. On the drive back, Liam filled the car with stories and laughter, trying to recapture the carefree rhythm from before. But Ethan barely heard him. His eyes occasionally drifted to the passenger seat, where Noah stared out the window, lost in his own thoughts. The forest gave way to the open road, then to stretches of farmland and quiet towns. It felt like traveling not just through distance, but through everything unspoken between them. When they finally reached the city, Liam dropped Ethan off first. "Good trip, huh?" Liam said, grinning. "Yeah," Ethan replied. "It was." Noah turned slightly, managing a small, uncertain smile. "Take care, okay?" Ethan nodded. "You too." As the car pulled away, Ethan stood on the curb, watching until it disappeared from view. A strange stillness settled over him, not emptiness, but acceptance. The trip had given him something he hadn't expected, not love, not closure, but truth. That evening, alone in his apartment, he opened his journal, something he hadn't done in years, and began to write. He wrote about how love sometimes arrives disguised as confusion, how silence can hold entire conversations, and how truth, once seen, can never be unseen. That he ended the entry with a line that felt like both confession and release. "That trip didn't break us, it revealed us." Sometimes, love doesn't ask to be understood. It only asks to be honest. He closed the journal and sat in the fading light, a faint sense of peace settling over him. Whatever had happened between him and Noah would remain theirs, a quiet story written between heartbeats, carried forward not with regret, but with understanding. "And though that night changed everything, it also set me free." The weeks after Ryan's departure unfolded slowly, like pages turned in a book Daniel no longer wished to read. Silence lingered in his flat, heavy yet cleansing. Where once there had been late-night texts, secret meetings, and the constant thrum of guilt, now there was only stillness. At first, the quiet unnerved him. But as days passed, he began to breathe easier, realizing that absence could also be a gift. Chloe remained a steady presence, often arriving with takeaway food and blunt observations. "You look better without that storm cloud hovering over you," she remarked one evening, setting cartons of noodles on his kitchen counter. Daniel smiled faintly. "Better, maybe. Not lighter. Not yet." "You will be," she said firmly. "Healing doesn't rush." Her words settled into him like seeds, reminders that growth required time. For the first time in years, Daniel gave himself permission not to rush into someone else's arms or someone else's approval. He spent long afternoons sketching designs without deadlines, evenings reading novels that had gathered dust, and mornings walking through the city with no destination but clarity. Yet Ryan was not entirely gone. Occasionally, Daniel glimpsed him in fleeting thoughts, memories of laughter shared during their short-lived connection, or the haunted look in Ryan's eyes when he had begged to stay. Daniel did not erase those moments, but he refused to let them hold power. They were pieces of a story, not its conclusion. Emma's pain lingered on the edges too. Daniel never heard from her again, though he carried her voice in memory, the sharp crack of betrayal, the disbelief. It haunted him that he had been part of her heartbreak. He wished he could undo it, but some wounds only reminded him of the cost of silence and compromise. One evening, weeks later, Daniel attended a small gallery opening. He wandered among canvases of bold colors and abstract shapes, his eyes catching on a piece that mirrored his own emotions, fractured lines, but stitched together with threads of gold. A stranger stood beside him, tall and soft-spoken, making a quiet comment about the artist's use of color. Their conversation flowed easily, free of the weight Daniel had carried for so long. For the first time, he felt the possibility of connection without the shadow of secrecy. As he left the gallery, Chloe nudged him knowingly. "See? There are people who won't make you a secret. You deserve someone like that." Daniel laughed lightly, though he didn't commit to hope just yet. "Maybe," he said. "But first, I need to deserve myself." Nights became less restless. The city lights outside his window no longer mocked him with memories of stolen kisses and broken promises. Instead, they reminded him that the world was vast, filled with stories still unwritten. His story with Ryan had ended, not neatly, not without pain, but with truth. And truth, though heavy, was a foundation he could build upon. On a crisp Sunday morning, Daniel returned once more to his old school's football field. The grass was damp with dew, and the empty stands loomed like silent witnesses. He stood there quietly, recalling the boy who once feared this place, who once thought survival meant silence. Now, standing in the same space, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not triumph, not bitterness, just release. That he whispered into the cool morning air, "I am not who you said I was. I am who I choose to be." The words carried no audience, no applause, but they mattered. They were his, and they were enough. As he walked away, Daniel did not look back. His story was still unfolding, and for once, it belonged entirely to him.